Capture the passion.
Welcome back to season 3 of CPTP. My name is Jorge Ramirez, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Judy Krause. We're going to talk about anti bias education and early childhood education and theory into practice. Dr. Judy, please tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Jorge. I'm currently serving 2 roles at Pacific Oaks College and Children's School. I am winding down my time as executive director at the Children's School, and I have just recently developed a Doctorate of Education in Early Childhood Education program, and will be heading back to the college for the 2023-2024 academic year to launch that program. I've been working with young children and their families since 1978 and have been in higher ed working with adult learners since 1989. I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for being with us. Let's start talking about anti-bias education. You have a lot of expertise in that. Share some knowledge with us. What does anti-bias education mean?
So when I first started working with young children in 1978, everything was as biased and stereotyped as you could possibly imagine. Every book, every child toy that was put out, every advertisement or TV show that children were exposed to. So as teachers during that time, we were just paving the way and creating our own, trying to figure out how this was all going to work. And then in 1989, Louise Derman Sparks, who's a retired faculty from Pacific Oaks, changed the world of early childhood education. She had been working at the Children's School with the Anti-Bias Task Force on coming up with anti-bias curriculum. And when her book was published in 1989, the whole ECE community was just like, wow, oh my gosh, we've been working in silos all this time. Do you see what's happening at Pacific Oaks? So Professor Derman Sparks hasn't stopped her work, even though she's retired from teaching. She has continued working in anti-bias education, and she's well known throughout the whole world. So in anti-bias education, we have 4 goals that we use with the children. The first one is identity. It's really getting to know, who am I? How do I fit into all of this? The second one is diversity, looking at the world around you. People are taller, people are shorter, people are different colors, people speak different languages. The next one is recognizing what's fair and right. And that's, a little bit more difficult, but kids get it. Like, okay, that's not fair, right? The hardest part is goal number 4, and that's advocacy. That's standing for what's right. But it's amazing that when you start this with children as young, we started in our infant toddler program. So by the time they hit the 2-year-old yard, they're already starting to say, that's not fair. By the time they get that year before kindergarten, they've got this down. I was talking to Louise Derman Sparks a few months back, and we were talking about anti-biased education. And she said, many schools get those first 2. They get the identity and the diversity. But where oftentimes people are falling short is that 3 and 4, knowing what's fair and right, and then the advocacy piece. So when we think of anti-bias education, we want to make sure that we include all 4, because kids really get it, and then they take that with them throughout their whole life.
So let me ask you this. Do you think it sort of becomes like a clash, so to speak, when I go to Pacific Oaks, I'm learning this way, and then I go into the K-12 school system, and we don't see much of that advocacy specifically. Does that create some form of conflict with children, or do they thrive academically, socially, emotionally? What has been your research with that?
So I'm going to take two views of that. I'm going to look at the teacher's perspective, and I'm going to look at the child's perspective. I'll start with the child's perspective. So children who have grown up with this, we've done a lot of work with them, looking at them as adults and how this has been lifelong for them. Just recently, we interviewed some, some children's school alum, one who is in their 40s, another one in their 30s, who were sharing how taking this with them helped them in school. So they don't need, by the time they leave us or a school that gives them this foundation, they don't need us to guide them through it, because they've already figured it out, right? So they already know how to advocate. So by the time they hit kindergarten, they can do it without us. So that's our goal. Our goal is to get them ready for the world, right?
Solid
so that
foundation that's been
yeah,
established and
yeah,
has been built.
it's building that foundation. So the kids are ready.
Right.
What's harder for teachers is when you're in that environment, especially if it's a public school. Some schools are trained. So I don't want to stereotype and say that every school district does not embrace anti-bias education, because that's not true. But if you're in a school where it's not embraced, what a teacher can do is whatever they can do in their own classroom. So it doesn't matter if they're in kindergarten or if they're a senior in high school. You can still instill these goals with those students.
Right.
And you just do what you can do in your own classroom, because you're just making a difference one child at a time, so that when they leave you and they go into the next, maybe they didn't have 4 years like we do at the children's school, or as a preschool teacher, you have them from birth until 5, or maybe you have them from 2 until 5. But you have them that year of kindergarten or that year of 3rd grade. And as a teacher, you can make the difference with those children that are with you.
Yes, of course. So then, in other words, early childhood education is very important.
Yes, yes.
And it's kind of politicized to an extent of, we're going to make early childhood education available to everybody, universal preschool to everybody. Now, one of the questions that I have, being a professional in the field, is, well, is it quality? And what's your perspective on quality early childhood education, and what does it look like, more importantly?
Right. So it's really important when we're doing this Preschool for All initiative, and that's nationwide,
Right.
that it's a quality program. So just last year, we discovered in Tennessee what happens if you have an early childhood program that's not high quality. So for those who don't know about that study that happened last year, it was a 5-year study, but it was published in, I believe, late 2021, early 2022, is they were looking at previous research of the benefits of preschool, and then they implemented this program that wasn't a high quality program. And so rather than having the results that they expected at the end, it was a big flop. It was, so detrimental to those children. And that's the thing, is if you don't do it right, it can hurt kids. Yeah, because in the first 5 years, that's when 90% of our brain develops, in those first 5 years. So they're so, so important that we get it right.
So let me ask you this, Judy. What does it look like doing it right? Because we have different types of early childhood education programs. We have public, we have religious based, private. What does it look like? Does it matter the type of program it is, or is it more of the actual implementation of maybe certain practices, certain theories? What does it look like?
So it is more of how it's implemented, because you can implement quality preschool in any program type. The program type doesn't matter. So I'm a social constructivist, almost like I'm in an AA meeting. Hi, I'm Judy. I'm a social constructivist. So social constructivists, we follow the theories of Piaget, Vygotsky, Dewey, Erickson. I can go on and on. So in a nutshell, what I believe is a social constructivist, and what the research demonstrates how children learn best, is that children learn through self-exploration, through experimentation, through discovery. They learn based on their interests. Children learn best through play. Now, because I'm a social constructivist, okay.
Say that again.
Okay.
Children learn best how?
Through play. And I'm going to go out on this limb here, because I'm a social constructivist.
Go for it.
I believe that everybody learns best this way, based on your interests, based on self-discovery, self-exploration, experimentation, and play. So I've been teaching adult learners since 1989, and that's the way that I teach adults, the same way I teach children. At Pacific Oaks, that's what we're all about. That's how we teach our children in the children's school, and that's how we teach our adults in every program, even the business programs at Pacific Oaks College. So how does that look like in a classroom? So at the children's school, we use a curriculum called emergent curriculum. And Betty Jones, Professor Betty Jones, who just recently passed away, her life's work was all about emergent curriculum. She's not the one who invented it, because emergent curriculum is that philosophy of social constructivism. And teachers have been working with children in this method. It's been written about as early that I've seen in the 1600s by Johann Comenius. In his book called The School of Infancy. He talked about how young children learn based on their interests through self-exploration, through play. He talked about that. So she didn't invent it, but she's the one who all of her work was based on this. So what we do is we do a lot of observation of children, and we see what are children interested in, where are children developmentally, and then we prepare the environment based on those interests and their developmental level. And so the children, it's facilitated by adults, but it's led by children. And that leads into project work. So Lily and Katz did a lot of work on project work. So if you wanted to learn more about that, you could Google is such an amazing tool now. You could Google her and all her articles will come up. So in long-term projects, what you do is with groups of children who are interested in something, you I don't want to say prolong it, you help the children, you extend it with the children. And so what happens, I'll give an example. For 2 years, we did rivers and streams. I, as a co-researcher along with the children, and that's what you are, you're co-researching together with the children when you're facilitating this. Because believe me, I didn't know anything about rivers and streams. 2 years, this group was interested in it. I had another group interested in volcanoes. I learned a lot about volcanoes. So I had one little guy, and we were in the city of Norwalk, was where the school was. And we were talking about volcanoes. And so he wanted to know, were there any volcanoes in California? So, of course, my immediate answer is like, no, I didn't think there were any volcanoes in California. Well, there are, Mammoth.
It's not active.
Yeah, Mammoth is a volcano. It's not active, right? But he asked, okay, is it dormant or is it extinct? Well, in my mind, I'm thinking it's got to be extinct, right? Because I lived through Mount St. Helens because I'm old. And even here, I lived in Downey at the time, we had ash covering our car. And Washington's pretty far away, right? So I'm thinking it's got to be extinct, right? No, it's dormant.
No.
So then he asks me, 4 years old, so he knows, okay, do we have one in California? Yes, it's in Mammoth. Is it dormant or extinct? Well, it's dormant. Then he wants to know, how many miles is it from Mammoth to Norwalk? Because he wants to know how far that lava is going to travel. Yeah. So that's not going to happen in a worksheet, right? He's not going to understand like how many miles away, how far can lava travel? Is it distinct? Is it dormant? And I didn't know the answers to these questions. We looked them up. We researched them together.
So that's essentially what a facilitator, a teacher does in early childhood education is you get the children's interest, you build on it, you extend it, continue to build on their knowledge, but you're still doing research to help you prepare into what they might be asking. Now, I'm curious to know what you think. How does it differ from a prescribed curriculum? There's a lot of school districts, a lot of programs that really invest a lot of money, a lot of resources into prescribed curriculum. Not saying that they're bad, but I just want to know based on brain development, child development specifically, and which is best for children. Do you think that having a prescribed curriculum, not that it's bad, but it just doesn't give them that full scope of knowledge as opposed to what you're describing with emergent curriculum?
Well, you said not that it's bad, but it actually can have a detrimental effect on their brain.
Thank you.
And when you are in those first 5 years, 90% of your brain is developing, right? So anytime during your life, it's really, really easy to memorize and spit back knowledge, right?
Oh,
anytime you can do that.
Yes.
But to problem solve, if you don't get that problem solving in the first 5 years, it's going to be difficult for you to problem solve throughout your entire life.
And by problem solving, you're also talking about making decisions
and thinking things through. Right.
So a quick example, and I know this happens a lot at my college level courses where your midterm is a reflective paper. What's a reflective paper? it's pretty much putting your ideas together
Right.
based on what we talked about the first half of the semester. So give
Mhm.
me your perspective. And it's always, well, what does that look like? What are you looking for? What do you want me to write? Can you give me an
Can
example?
I see it from my book? Is it in the book? Can I use my
Exactly.
book?
What page can I use?
Right.
And it's like, no, and this is not a knock on the students because they've been conditioned to
Mhm.
think that
To spit
way
back.
from
Mhm.
K through 12. So you're talking
Mhm.
about potentially 13 years
Mhm.
of being told what to do, when to do, and how to do it. Now you're at a university and you can't problem solve. You can't
You
take
can't
that
think it on
initiative.
your own.
But this stems back even further into early childhood education.
That's where it starts.
Because we're not giving them that opportunity.
Mhm.
We're not conditioning them to think for themselves. And I'm glad and I'm very grateful that you said it is a detriment. And I think as teachers, as future teachers, we need to really conceptualize and understand that just because most districts, schools are doing it doesn't necessarily make it right. And in this case, it sounds like we're probably in the minority. So how do we advocate for this? What do we tell our future teachers that are listening to this? How can we instill in young children to think for themselves for that long-term success?
So before I answer the advocacy question, there's 4 things in my mind that I want to make sure that I do.
Yeah.
So the first thing we were talking about was, is this detrimental? So is there research out there that shows? So I challenge people to look up the Perry Preschool Project, their
yes.
Weinhardt study.
Yes.
So that study started in 1962. And just a plug for Louise Derman Sparks, she was a teacher at the Perry Preschool. So that is the longest longitudinal study looking at how this affects children lifelong. So you want to look at that. So what the Weinhardt study has shown, and what many, many, many studies have shown since then, is that when you look at children who have been in programs like this in preschool, so they've been in these kinds of programs till preschool, then they go to kindergarten. So when they go to kindergarten, it's a little bit harder for them to adjust, right? Because they're used to this type of curriculum. But it's easy to learn to memorize and rote learn, right? That's easy to do. So they pick it up pretty quick. So initially, it looks like those kids who are memorizing everything, who are doing those worksheets, it looks like they're doing better in kindergarten, right? But then what the research shows is when they hit 3rd grade, all of a sudden now in 3rd grade, children are expected to think outside the box, and they can't because they didn't learn how to do that. And if you don't learn how to problem solve in the first 5 years, it's not that you can never learn how to do it. It's just hard. And so those kids who had that part of their brain developed, they start to excel in 3rd grade forward, right? So there's 2 examples. That was my 2 things. And then there was an example that I wanted to give. In one of the textbooks that I used to teach from a creativity class, there was 2 pictures of a child drawing a bird. So when she was in preschool, she would draw birds, really elaborate birds. They had feathers and beaks and, just very, over the years, she had been really interested in birds and had drawn all of these birds. So she gets to kindergarten and the teacher says, okay, we're going to draw a bird. And she does the little thing that looks like a W. Mm-hmm. And so all the children drew birds with these little W's. I just got chills as in my mind, I could see in the textbook. Here's this picture of this elaborate bird that she had learned on her own how to draw over the years. And now in kindergarten, she's drawing these little W birds. So that was the 3rd thing. I want to make sure I get all 4 before I answer the advocacy question. And the 4th thing, I'm going to share my daughter's experience. She's 32, almost 33 now. But she had been in, as you can imagine, all 4 of my children went to these kinds of preschools. So she had been just in, the best. She was the lucky one, my youngest daughter. She had the best teachers all through school. So she had been in a preschool that was social constructivist. So she goes to kindergarten on the first day of school and she comes back. And I ask her, here's my baby, my youngest child, first day of kindergarten. I worked so hard to pick the right kindergarten and everything. How was your first day of school? What was it like? And she says, Mommy, in kindergarten, it's different. I go, it is. It's different. How? She goes, yeah. In kindergarten, they just want you to sit and listen. They don't care about your ideas. They don't want to know what you think. And so that was so profound to me. It's like, here is this 5-year-old, 4, because back then she started kindergarten in September. She turned 5 on her 3rd day of school. She had a kindergarten teacher. She's coming away with, they don't care about my ideas. They don't care how you think. And in preschool, that's what it's all about, right? So after that, I'm like, okay, I am going to make sure when I'm on the floor with children that I always care about their ideas and I always care about what they think. Because this almost 5-year-old, that was her observation. So we've got the research supporting it. We've got real life examples. And then your question was, how can you advocate for this, right? So we have a very, very active group here in California. It's called PEACH. Don't ask me to say what the acronym stands for, but it's a group of individuals from institutions of higher ed throughout the state of California. And then we have subcommittees within this group who are working on different initiatives throughout the state. And they're really working very diligently with the CTC, with the Commission for Teacher Licensing and Credentialing. So they're doing a lot of work on the child development permit. They're doing a lot of advocacy for this K-3 credential that we're taking off the shelf and dusting off to re-implement. So we have advocates out there. So you want to advocate not just at the state level, but at your local level and at your own school. You want to do what you can do in your own classroom. I have a lot of students who work in Head Start programs or state preschool programs, and they have this prescribed curriculum. And so they think, okay, I have this prescribed curriculum that I have to do. How can I do that and make it developmentally appropriate for children? And so that's really the challenge that we have. One time I was observing, when I was teaching student teaching, I was observing my student teachers, and I was at the school where the letter of the day was B, right? So B is the letter of the day. So I go into this 1 3-year-old class, and the teacher's sitting there, they're 3. They're wiggling, they're all over the carpet. She's got this thing, she's writing the letter B, and she's having all the children say, B says B, this whole thing. Yeah. So then I walk into the next classroom, 3-year-old classroom, the letter of the day is B. So as they're getting up after just reading a book about something that's the babies or something that started with B, they said, and today when you get up to choose where you want to work, you can make burritos, you can go over into the blocks, or we're going to do ball painting. So it was the letter of the day was B, so she had to do the letter of the day, but she didn't have 3-year-olds sitting on there saying B, because they're 3 and they're not going to hear that until they're 7. So it's, there was, I can't remember exactly how many hours it was. It was Michael Lehman. I was in a workshop, and he said, if you want to teach the child the concept of a calendar, if you take a 4-year-old and you try to teach them the concept of the calendar, it's going to take you like 27,000 hours, something like that, something outrageous. It was close to 3,000. I don't want an exact number, but it was close to 3,000 hours. But if you teach a 6-year-old the concept of a calendar, it takes them 5 minutes. So why would you try to spend almost 3,000 hours teaching them something that if you just wait till they're ready, they're going to get it in 5 minutes?
So very, very good example there, which prompts a question, is something that I've struggled with my career working with bigger school districts into the notion that the earlier you feed children knowledge, academic components, the letters, the colors, the numbers, shapes, size, and all that, then the belief is that you have a head start into their academic life. And that's the belief. Worked for a very large school district for 15 years. And it was a daily struggle with not just administrators, but the leadership, because they believe that this is the way that we're going to get them academically competent when they go to kindergarten. This notion of kinder readiness, this idea that if we start with the letters of the day earlier at the 3-year-old classroom, then when they get to the 4-year-old classroom, they're already going to get it, and so forth and so forth. Obviously, when you brought up the Prairie research, it's in my mind. It was like, oh, yes, everybody should read that. That's in the field, but unfortunately, we know that that's not the case. You talked about research into that. Children can regurgitate, and I use that word intentionally, to spit back out whatever they've memorized. Memorization and understanding of concepts is two
completely different. They're completely different.
I'm curious to know your opinion. Do you think that part of the problem in early childhood education is that we have leadership. I'm not going to say just administrators,
Mhm.
but leadership that they themselves don't understand what early childhood education is.
100%. Ray Pica wrote a book, great book. I'm going to give a plug. I don't even know who she is, never met her, but her book is called What If Everybody Understood Child Development?
Oh gosh.
And the world would be a different place
Mhm.
if everybody understood child development. And we wouldn't have this push down academics that we have.
Right.
I mean, remember the baby Einstein, every baby
Right.
can read. Yeah, babies can memorize, anybody can memorize.
Mhm.
But do you understand it if you push it down? No, just because you say A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, or can count to 100,
Oh my gosh.
that
Yes,
doesn't
yes.
mean that you understand or you memorize a flashcard. It doesn't mean that you understand how it works.
Right.
We had a parent who had a child at the children's school, and when he went to kindergarten, they were writing stories. And so the kindergarten teacher said, the children who were at more academic based preschools, their spelling was more correct, their word structure was better. This is into kindergarten. Our little guy, his story was the most elaborate, thought out, story.
Right.
But there were spelling errors, there were punctuation errors. Who cares about the spelling and the punctuation? We can teach you that.
Right.
But to think deep,
Mhm.
that's what it's all about, to really think deep, to be able to problem solve. Because anybody can say their ABCs and their colors and their 1, 2, 3s.
Right.
And so that's the one thing that happened here in the state of California when my mind just went blank on what it's called. The curriculum framework that we have, the early childhood development framework, which has the DRDP and the program learning guidelines and the foundations and all of that. When that was being created, we were working so hard at the local level and CAYC with the CTC on making sure that that was all developmentally appropriate. Same thing with TK. When TK first came out, we're working very, very, very closely with them on what's going to be there for TK. But the teachers that are out on the field, the ones that are working at those large school districts, that information doesn't trickle down to them, right?
Yes.
So my whole dissertation was on authentic assessment and using the DRDP as an authentic assessment tool. Mm-hmm. For those of you who don't know, the DRDP is the Desired Results Developmental Profile, and it is the state assessment tool that we use here in California. Now, what people don't often understand is if you have a state-funded program, I ran a state-funded program for many years, we needed to use a research-based curriculum. Right. So oftentimes people will buy this cookie-cutter curriculum. Mm-hmm. Well, emergent curriculum is a research-based curriculum, so I use that. You need to use a research-based assessment tool. So you could use the DRDP if you used it properly, which unfortunately people aren't doing.
That's a whole different
conversation. That's a whole other podcast. Yeah. But you can use any research-based. Environmental rating scale. You need to use something that's research-based on setting up your environment. It doesn't have to be the Eckers. Right. So oftentimes, and there's nothing wrong with the Eckers, there's nothing wrong with the DRDP.
It's just how it's used.
It's how it's used. It's not whole dissertation. It's 3 years of my life on that. But it's all about how it's used and implemented. So that's why I get so concerned about these prescribed cookie-cutter curriculums where everybody's supposed to be on page 27 on the same day. That's not going to benefit the children. That's what happened in Tennessee. This study that just happened, that's exactly what happened. Is this school district thought that we're going to do push-down academics and that we're going to, at the end, our result is going to be that these children are going to be way up here when these children were way down here. And it all backfired on them because the people who were conducting the study, the teachers, all the teachers had bachelor's degrees. When I read it, I'm thought, where did they get their bachelor's degrees? Yeah. That was my first question. Who taught these people that this was going to be okay, right? So it's getting those administrators they need to understand, what if everybody understood child development? If everybody got it, we wouldn't have that problem of push down academics. We wouldn't have that problem of people trying to do the DRDP like a standardized assessment, like I'm just going to call you up instead of just authentically take,
right.
And that's what that's what we do in emergent curriculum all the time.
Mhm.
We are observing children. We are seeing where they are developmentally. We are seeing what they're interested in. And those are the experiences that we're providing for them.
Right.
And people think that that's accidental, that it just magically happens. Emergent curriculum takes more work on the teacher's part than any cookie cutter curriculum.
And I was going to go into that. Do you think that the reason why bigger districts don't take that approach, does it have to do with more retraining teachers into the way they're teaching? You know, one of the, before you answer that, one of the conversations that I've had with people that I've mentored, people that I've worked with, is, but I'm a teacher. I'm supposed to teach children things that they don't know, not really understanding that children have prior knowledge, and our responsibility is to build them that knowledge, to pretty much broaden their perspective, as opposed to just let me push down as much as I can with you. Is it that it's just too much work to retrain teachers? Is it that we're not teaching them properly at the university level? Is it just a perspective that I think, oh, well, the way that I learned it as a student was this way, so now as a teacher, I have to teach it that way? Where do you think is the root of the problem that we need to address?
I think it's a combination of everything that you mentioned, but I think it really comes from the leadership. You know, I remember, like, I'm going to really show my age. I had thought my whole life, I thought, I want to be a kindergarten teacher. That's what I want to do. I want to teach kindergarten. I'm going to be a kindergarten teacher. And when I was in college, they didn't have, I started at the community college. They had early childhood education. So I took ECE classes in prep for transferring, right, so that I could be a kindergarten teacher. And one of the classes that I took was called Personal Vocational Adjustment. This was in the 70s. And we needed to look, I found this job in the Penny Saver. We needed to look in the Penny Saver, the newspaper, find 2 jobs that we were qualified for, and then act on one of them. And so I got hired as a preschool teacher in the afternoon. So in the morning, I was, now they would call them a paraeducator in the elementary school, in the kindergarten classroom. And in the afternoon, I was the afternoon preschool teacher at a local preschool. So when I get all done with school and I'm going to be a kindergarten teacher, year 1. I'm like, wait, this isn't right. Okay. Year 2, I'm like, okay, I am not a kindergarten teacher. Because at that time now, if I had the knowledge that I had now to advocate and to be able to adjust curriculum, and, you know, if I had that knowledge then, I was just a very young teacher. I wasn't in my 60s then, I was in my 20s. So what I didn't know how to do was to adjust it. Like, I saw these standards, and I had a principal who didn't get it. And so I was going against everything I had been taught, everything that I knew in my gut was right for kids. And I couldn't do it. So I went home pregnant, really pregnant at the end of this year. And I told my husband, I'm like, I'm not a kindergarten teacher. And he's like, okay, I'm not sure if you noticed this, but, you know, kindergarten teachers make this much. Preschool teachers make this much. We have 3 kids that are little, and you're pregnant. Because plus you get state teachers retirement. I was in my 20s. So he challenged me. He's like, you know, we can afford to do it if you could find a preschool job where you could make an equitable wage and you could still get the state teachers. So here I am, 9 months pregnant. 9 months pregnant. My dad, who was administrator in a very large school district, said, no one's going to hire you. Look how pregnant you are. I went in my suit, my maternity suit. I sat down in that interview, and that's when I got the job at the community college, where I was an administrator in the lab school. And then back then, this was in the 80s, you could teach community college. There was something called, I've got to remember what it's called, Community College Instructor Permit. So you didn't have to have your master's degree. I was grandfathered in 1989. So I was able to be in the lab school in the morning in my administrative role, spend lots of time on the floor with children, and then teach. I was required to teach 1 class a semester practicum, and then I taught another class along with that, 2 classes a semester. So then I got my master's, you know, and moved up. But I was able to leave that environment. Now 60-year-old Judy would advocate and change the curriculum that I was using in my classroom so that I could best meet those needs of the children. But Judy in her 20s didn't know how to do that. So I left, right? Instead of making a difference in the K through 12 system, I went back to what I knew, which was early childhood.
So that's, I think I resonate with you when you say the knowledge that you have now versus then. And I stand with that in so many things in my career, into saying, okay, I wish I'd known that then. So how we work is we mentor, right?
Mm-hmm.
We mentor students and
Mm-hmm.
we push that knowledge to them. So now that they're in the field, they're getting all the knowledge that we didn't have at their age.
Right.
And this is one of the great things that CPTP does, is we have mentors that give back to students. And one of the main reasons for our podcast is to share knowledge like yourself, what you're just sharing, which is very, very powerful. So I'm curious to know, and we've talked about this already. How do we get child development? What do you think is the determining factor into saying, yeah, you get child development, you know what it's about. You're going to be able to go into a classroom and play with the curriculum, where regardless of what it is, you're still going to do what's best for children.
Right.
They're going to get the best out of you. You're going to give them your best. Is it theory? Is it experience? Is it a combination of multiple things? What do you think is one of the biggest factors into someone where you can say you get child development?
So the first thing I think is intuitive. There's so much of it that comes intuitive from within you. Mm-hmm. So it takes a certain personality type, a certain person. You'll get people say, I love kids. It does, but you do. You have to love kids. Right. And part of it has to come from within who you are, right? So part of it's that. Part of it is the education and the experience, and then going forward. And you're always a lifelong learner. You never stop learning. So when I'm out presenting and going out, and that's one of the things I love to do besides for teaching adults, but whenever I present. So I'm going to be presenting at a workshop coming up in a few weeks. There'll be like 150 people there. If one person goes away and gets one thing they got from me, goes into their classroom and implements it, and does it for 30 years, how many kids did I just touch? And if she has an associate teacher in the classroom, and that associate teacher gets it one thing from her that she got from me, and then is in the classroom for 30 years, how many kids did I touch? So that's how I make a difference in children's lives, is by trying to reach the adults that work with them. So it's education, it's professional development, it's that ongoing professional development. You never stop learning. And it's really that understanding, because I didn't really get it until I got my master's degree. So I was at the community college as a student. I was there for 11 years. I loved the community college. Back then, you could just take all of these classes that didn't transfer, but they were so beneficial for puppetry. I took that class I talked about, personal vocational development, literacy, music, creativity, math and science, all of those classes that don't count. So I had like 120 units, 50 of them transferred from my bachelor's. Then when I got my bachelor's, the degree wasn't set up for working people. It was set up for, if I wanted a degree in, it was family and consumer sciences, which was child development at that time. It was the 70s. And so I had to take something that I could do at night. So I took human development with a specialization in child development, which sounds good. It's not the human development you would have at Pacific Oaks.
Right.
At the Cal State there were 5 ologies. Let's see if I can remember them. It was a long time ago. Psychology, sociology, gerontology, anthropology, and archaeology, I think. 5 ologies and 2 child development classes for my specialization, which transferred in from the community college. So in my bachelor's degree, I didn't really get it. Mm-hmm. When I got my master's degree, and it was in early childhood education, and every single class except the research classes were at that level of child development, it's like, oh my God, it's making sense. I get it. So I'd been doing it for a really long time and teaching for a long time before I really felt like that light bulb went on and I really got it. So it's that combination of intuition, education, experience, mentorship. I had an amazing mentor who actually teaches here at Rio Hondo now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Can I name drop?
Of course.
So Dr. Sandra Moe was my mentor in 1980 something. I can't remember. It was mid 80s, maybe 85, 86. She was my mentor. So to have a good mentor really, really makes a difference. It really makes. I'll name drop another mentor. So when I was getting my bachelor's degree, she's long since retired, but she did adjunct here for many, many years. Dr. Cindy Olivas was my mentor when I did my bachelor's degree. So having that mentor makes a difference. And I was one of those students, and I had many of these practicum students who thought, I don't need to take practicum.
Right.
I've been teaching for so many years. Why? I'm the one. I'm going to go to the dean, and I don't need to take practicum, right? Or can I do it at work? And they're like, no, you have to do it here. And I'm so, so glad that I did because of the mentorship that I received, working under somebody so amazing who had so much to share. And then I took that with me. So that was mid 80s, maybe 85, 86. Might have been 84. I can't remember, but it was 80s. She was just so, but I remember the experience. I remember her. I remember what we did in the classroom. I remember, the way that she interacted. It was what really, really stood out to me was the way that she interacted with children, because she never used the word no or said stop or said don't. And so she's the one who taught me to retrain myself to tell children what I expected of them. So I learned that from my mentor.
Yeah. For those of us that don't know, practicum is like the student teaching and child development in the undergrad level, where it's a requirement for us to do part of our studies. Interesting, you bring up, you said no is something that you don't tell children. There's this book, No, David, that's very popular, and the way that I've seen it used is, this is how I'm going to teach children what not to do. The way that I use that book is, we're going to tell David what he should be doing without using the word no or don't. So use that book in a totally different way. And I'm giving you this example to show that despite the curriculum that you're using, there's a way of tweaking it into making it geared specifically for children so they can get the best out of it, instead of having a cookie cutter, one size fits all approach. I'm curious to know, Judy, your personal experience and your advice into putting everything that we learn in child development into practice. So the theories that you mentioned, there's so many theorists and theories that we need to learn in child development, really understand. An argument that I've had with one of my students at the college level is, why are we still studying things that happened long before my parents were born? And my initial response was, well, study that theory and try to debunk it. Help me understand why you think that this theory is not applicable now. We had a whole conversation about that led into a conclusion of, wow, this is, if this applied the proper way, we can have a totally different outcome in society. What is your perspective in putting theory into practice, and how can we advocate for more understanding of it?
I'm going to start, and this is going to sound really nerdy. I'm going to start with my favorite theorist. People will often say, "Who's your favorite theorist?" And I don't even know that Vygotsky's my favorite, but this is why I'll reword it. People ask me, "Why do you work with young children? Why have you been working with young children for," as one of my colleagues likes to say, over 4 decades? So over 40 years. What is it? It's Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, right? There is something about it. So if you don't know about the ZPD, it's kind of like a triangle. So at the bottom, it's what the child can do by themselves, and or with help. And at the top is what they can do by themselves. So say, for example, they're learning how to tie their shoe, right? That would be at the bottom. They can maybe make the X with the laces. And at the top, they can tie their shoe all by themselves. But everything that happens in between, all of that learning that happens, and a lot of it, Vygotsky's focuses on language during that time. That's the zone of proximal development. When children are getting it and that light bulb comes on, That's what excites me. When I see especially two children together negotiating something, and I'm like, oh, I get so excited. They figured it out.
Yeah.
And so one of my children, when I was working at the community college, I worked August 1st to May 31st every year. So my kids didn't go back to school till September. So that month of August, they were with a family member. And so my daughter was, I believe she was 3 at this time. So when I dropped her off in the morning, she had her floaties and her bathing suit. And when I came to pick her up, she's like, Mommy, do you want to see me swim? And I'm like, sure. No floaty. She jumps in the pool, swimming laps. Like, what happened? She's like, Vanessa, her 5-year-old cousin. We were playing school. She taught me how to swim. There's something about two children together working through that ZPD. It's just amazing to see. So when I see those light bulbs come on and I see those children working together and so it's theory for me, right? And then knowing that children are really going with what they're interested in. It's like what we just talked when we started, going on their interests, learning through self-discovery, experimentation, exploration, through play. It's all about that. It's tying all of those theories in together in a way that you can interact with the children and facilitate that learning. And when you see that light bulb go off, I get so excited. I mean, I just like, oh, look, ZPD. And teachers are like, right, Judy.
And Judy, please validate something for me. Many times I share with my mentees, you literally see children think. Like
Yes.
you're looking at them
Mhm.
and you're hearing them and you're watching how they interact with each other. You literally see the gears and their synapses connecting in their mind where you're like,
And you get so excited.
yeah, right? It does happen, right? It does happen, Judy, right? I didn't make that up,
No,
right?
it
does
happens
happen,
all the
right?
time. And that's the part that I love.
That's the most
That's
rewarding part of what you do.
yeah, what you do. And you just stand back because they've got it. And I remember one time it was putting on a sandal, and we were gonna go inside, and the children were getting their shoes from the shoe basket, and one child was trying to put on her sandal, and 3 people were working together to try to help her figure out how to buckle this sandal. And then, they did it, and then they came on in. And I remember I was observing in a classroom one time, and the same thing happened. A child was going to go put on their sandal, and I was getting all excited because I'm thinking, how's the teacher went over, buckled it, and then they went in. And so, like, they took that moment away. I don't want to. Piaget said something, and I'm going to paraphrase because otherwise I'm just going to blow it all. I'm not going to try to quote exactly. But he said that if we tell children what the answer is, we take away that discovery and them believing that they invented it themselves. So say, for example, you've got colors in the water table. You've got blue and you've got yellow. If you tell the children, if we mix blue and yellow, we're going to make green, then you just stole it from them. But if you let them mix the blue and the yellow together and it becomes green, they're like, green. They think nobody else in the world knows that when you mix blue and you mix yellow together, it makes green. They feel like they invented it themselves. You can't take those experiences away from them. You need to provide them for them.
You hit it right in the head. It's about taking a step back. Yes, we're teachers. Yes, we're educators. The mentality should be we're the facilitators.
But that's what I was just going to say. We're facilitating.
Facilitate their learning to give them that self-efficacy of believing in themselves.
Right.
Not just preschool, but like we said when we started, building that solid foundation
for life.
What an amazing, very deep conversation. Thank you, Judy. So what would be the advice for our future teachers that are listening out there, or maybe our current teachers that are out there? What advice would you give them so we can continue to build these types of foundations, regardless of the program that they're working in? What can we learn from you?
I would say my advice would be set up the environment for success, right? Don't set up any no places. Let every place in your environment be a yes place that children can go. Observe children, see what they're interested in. That helps you with that environment. We didn't even touch on building relationships. That's a whole other podcast. Right. But you really need to build relationships with the children so that you can build, experiences for them. and just have fun.
Ah.
You know, have fun. Let your day be a fun thing. And you know what you're going to find out when you set up that yes, yes environment and when you're following the lead of the children, that you're not going to have that many behavior problems,
Right.
because the behavior problems come from, okay, we're going to force everybody to stand in a line and everybody's going to have to sit crisscross applesauce. Oh my God, I hate that crisscross applesauce. Just sit down, you know. You want to lay down, you can lay. If you want to sit on your bottom, lay on your bottom. Just make sure everyone can see. Be respectful of the person next to you. So, you know, just be there in the moment with the children. Let the children be children.
Mm-hmm.
Observe, set up that environment, and have fun. Your day should be, at the end of the day, you're going to be tired because this is a lot of work. You're going to be exhausted. We've had some teachers out lately, and I've spent the whole day in the classroom, and there's a reason you're a grandma at my age. It's a lot of work. You're going to be tired, but you're going to have fun, and you're going to watch those children thrive. You're going to have a lot less behavior problems. And if you have a cookie cutter prescribed curriculum, try to adapt it the best you can to the children that you have in your group.
Wow. Thank you again, Dr. Judy Krause. Appreciate the knowledge, your expertise. I hope this was meaningful to everybody. Thank you so much. We'll see you again in the next show.
Capture the passion.